And the recording's in progress. So that's
Oopsies.
all good. So we can
You teaching us how to sell houses. Yes.
That's right. We're gonna help you get. We're gonna make you better at selling houses by doing this. All right. So every time there's an obstacle, it's an opportunity, right? Every time something goes wrong, it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to do it better next time. And in this scenario, it's an opportunity to sell your value. What we're gonna do is look for obstacles. We're gonna take a transaction, map it out, and just look for obstacles so that you can call attention to them at the beginning, and be proactive and make yourself look good. I'm going to send this out. These are some of the websites we're going to talk about today. State Department of Assessment and Taxation, where we start every title search. It's just a database of information. Maryland Land Records, that's the foundation of a title search. Everything we need is in there. Plats.net, that's where the plats, the maps, everything is, the easements, everything's recorded for all the properties. Google Maps seems silly, but I'm going to show you why I use Google Maps. Maryland Judiciary Case Search. You can find judgments. You can find out if like a divorce is in play. You can find out if a person's like, criminal, and maybe I don't want to go on this, presentation, whatever. Register of Wills. So at some point in your career, you're going to deal with an estate, right? You're going to deal with somebody that's inherited a property, and you're going to need to collect some information from the Registrar of Wills. The GIS data is the map of the state of Maryland. You can just kind of zoom in on a property and kind of see what's around it. Sometimes if I get lost in a search, I need to find out what's going on behind the property or whatever, I'll use GIS to find it, and I'll show you what that is. And last but not least, there's a HUD website to see if condo associations are approved by FHA. I'm just throwing that one out there. I've seen so many deals lately get killed because the condo association wasn't FHA approved and the buyer had an FHA loan. So I just want to show you how to read that one out in the beginning. It's been happening a lot lately for some reason.
You need a handout.
Oh yeah, I've got a handout here that has a checklist. Zoom land people, I'll give you an email in a second. Just send us your email. We'll send you all this stuff. But this is the checklist that we use when doing a preliminary review or title search. Okay, shameless plug time. You already helped me out, Paula, with the app. I want to make sure everybody has the app to calculate seller net, chief, and buyer estimates. When you go into a listing appointment, it's a great way to have branded, very pretty, quick, easy to do estimates for the seller or buyer. What we do is preload it with everything that could reasonably occur on a transaction, so that all you need to do is put in a purchase price, loan amount, and payoff balance, and we'll get you in the ballpark. If you don't have the app, contact us. We'll get you set up. What's your email? Brian Harper. Brian's not here today. He had to do some marketing stuff for us. But email Brian Harper, bharper@coastassure.com. He'll get you set up with that. If you're a newer agent or just want to learn more about what we do, ask him about the title talk and tech check. We'll sit down for an hour, tell you about everything that kind of goes on behind the scenes, kind of what's happening during the transaction, what we're asking the buyer, and what the buyer then turns around and asks you the same question. So we kind of coach you on what to say in those situations. Sellers as well. And the pre-listing snapshot, that's what this thing is. What I'm giving you is we call it pre-listing snapshot. This is something that you need to learn it. You need to understand how it works. You want to know how land records work. But in the end, you're going to want to leverage that back out. You want to have somebody that can help you do that. I think it's important to learn it so that you understand how this all goes together. I think we were talking to somebody in their real estate exam class, or they just said like, oh, it's a list of people that own the house before you. That's it. Like that's the title. It's done. There's a lot to it. There's a lot more to it. And I think the more you know it, the more you understand it, the better agent you'll be. But I want you to feel free to send it back to us. If you get caught up on something, you need help. A lot of people, if you're brand new on your next listing appointment, just give us the address. Let us do the report. Let us show you how it works. Some of the veteran agents I know, they have somebody in the team that does this, or they do it themselves. And if they get stuck, they just say, hey, this is maintenance agreement. I don't know what this is. Hey, this looks like a lien. Can you help me out? So feel free to leverage that back to us. That's it for our shameless plugs. All right. Can I, I'm gonna, well, let me do real quick. So there are 3 things that my mom told me you don't mess with. All right. There's 3 things with dealing with other people that you don't mess with. All right. First one's easy. You don't mess with somebody's money, right? You tell a seller that they're getting less money than you talked about in the beginning, they get upset. You tell a buyer that this is going to cost you more than we thought, they get upset, right? So it's really important to understand the money of how all this works. What's something else you don't mess with? Any guesses how this is going to go?
No, money seems to cover it all.
Money covers most of it. That's a big one.
Family.
Family's a great one.
Okay.
Family's not on the. My mom never said that. Pain. Pain. Yeah. Don't cause pain to somebody. For sure. What was that? Food.
She just said, ooh.
Assets is good. All right. I'm gonna. Don't waste somebody's time. Don't waste people's time. You
Okay.
know. I'm sure your seller, after
Okay, yes.
90 days getting through this, we're a week of settlement, they're going to be so ecstatic to hear, oh, the title company found out there's an unrecorded release. We can't close for like 3 weeks now. Like, oh, I have 3 more weeks. I have all this stuff scheduled and ready to go. Oh, this is such a stress reliever. No, I'm being sarcastic. Like, they're going to be so mad. They've worked so hard to get to this point. The last thing anybody wants is a delay. So you don't mess with people's time. And the last thing my mom said, you don't mess with. You don't mess with a person's solar panels, private road maintenance agreements, or FHA condo. It was really weird. My mom always said that when I was a kid. I didn't understand it, but now I do. Obviously, I put those in there because we're seeing this a lot lately. And whatever we talk about today, I'm going to kind of put this on you. I want to get some feedback from you. I do want to talk about these 3 things just because they've been a problem lately. All right, my handwriting is atrocious. Can I get somebody up here to help me write some stuff down?
Do we have some markers?
We do.
Okay.
Should be in that top drawer.
The only thing worse than my handwriting is my spelling. So, right?
Oh, gosh.
Right? You know, she caught me earlier. All right, so money. Let's talk about money. When we're dealing with a person's money, how does it translate into real estate transaction? When does money come up? What's that?
No, it depends on when. I mean, if it's through a consultation, it's discussed right up front.
Sales up front. Yeah, so you're gonna be up front with costs. I like that. Can you write up front?
Up front?
Up front. I like that. Specifically, like what kind of money do we see in play?
Deposits.
Deposits. Yeah.
Down payments.
EMD. Yeah.
Commission.
Commission. That's a good one. Yeah.
Right on.
Closing.
Net proceeds.
Net proceeds. All right. I'm gonna hone in on net proceeds. What are some things that can affect their net proceeds?
Some contribution.
So contribution. Taxes. That's a big one. Taxes.
Am I right?
Can you write taxes out for me? Yeah.
Repairs.
Taxes, repair. Yep. Repairs. HOA. Absolutely. Yep. A lot of money that goes into transferring HOA sometimes.
Inspection.
Inspections. Yep. All right. Now let's talk about people's time. Like, how do we save people time? Why do we waste their time in real estate? Making mistakes. Yep. What's a big one? What's the biggest time waster of them all? Procrastination. Like procrastinating on problems. Yeah. You get close, I'll be happy. All right, so I want to just try to see like what we can take care of today. The biggest one, so taxes. There's been a lot of situations where sellers are finding out about certain taxes late in the game, and they get upset. Their net proceeds goes down, and they want to know why they didn't know about this sooner. We have the checklist here. Out of all the potential taxes, what do you guys want to talk about? Recapture tax, withholding tax, capital gains tax. Who's heard of any of these and knows how it works? Mike?
Yeah. Which ones?
I don't know, which one's more exciting to you guys? Like, I'm trying to
Well,
get
that was tax.
capital gains, okay. Yes, thank you for getting pictures. My social media people yell at me, I never take pictures of these things. I'm always like, I'm too busy talking.
Of writing capital gain.
You're good. So we're gonna talk about capital gains. Has anybody experienced, seller withholding tax? Has anybody seen that yet? Okay, that's fine, we're gonna talk about that. And a rare one is, but it happens, it's the recapture tax. This is something your buyers and sellers have to deal with. So I just wanna show you how we would be proactive in a preliminary title review and finding these things. Starting with SDAT, we're on the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. We're gonna be able to get information about the current owner, the property taxes themselves, plat reference, the deed reference. We're gonna figure, ground rent, that's a big one. Making sure there's ground rent or isn't ground rent. What happens if we try to sell a property that has ground rent that really does, I didn't say that right. What happens if you list a property, it's fee simple, and it turns out it has ground rent? Anybody know what happens?
The owner has to approve the ground.
Either the owner absorbs it, or I've seen the realtor absorb it because they made a mistake. Or it just gives the buyer an out of the contract. So we want to make sure we're on top of ground rent. And there's one that's not on here. Who's familiar with front foot benefit and user assessment?
Yes.
Right, that's another one that messes with people's money. So just going through the State Department of Assessment and Taxation website. First time you go on, it's indexed by address. You put in the property address, the street name, and boom, you get information on the property itself. You can use the owner's name. That's how we do our title search. The Maryland land records are indexed by name, so we start with the name. Just figure out who the person is and make sure that's who you're meeting with. Number one, right? You know. Number two, could be an LLC, could be a trust, it could say it's an estate. If any of those things are a factor, that changes the game a little bit. It changes the way they sign the contract, changes some of the paperwork that needs to be provided. It's actually on your checklist on the last page, but what things are needed if this person is if this person is an entity. And also, if they're a felon. When we do the Maryland judiciary case search, you never know who you're meeting. You want to make sure you're meeting the right people.
This link is on the paperwork that you gave us?
Yes, okay. The first one. All right, agricultural recapture tax. We see a lot of this in Western Howard County, in Carroll County. This is when a property is more or less zoned agricultural. And if you keep it agricultural, it's zoned agricultural and they get a tax break. If you intend to buy it and you don't want to do it use it as a farm or whatever, there's a thing called recapture tax. And you have to actually go back and pretty much pay back taxes. So a buyer property has recapture tax. There's a big chunk of money that needs to be paid up front in order to make that happen. As a listing agent, I believe you need to disclose that. And when you're representing a buyer, that's something that they need to consider. It was put in place to just keep things zoned agricultural. They don't want developers coming in and it makes the developers pay a big chunk of money if they want to develop property. Capital gains. We may talk about capital gains. First place to look for capital gains is if it's a principal residence. If the answer is yes, you're usually okay. The way capital gains works is if it's an individual, you can make up to $250,000. So that's sales price minus payoff and all that. So you can make up to $250,000 without paying capital gains. If you're a married couple, you can make up to $500,000 on a property without paying capital gains taxes. Again, sales price minus mortgages that you owe. If it's not the principal residence, this would be a good opportunity to talk to your client about possibly doing a 1031 tax deferred exchange. That is a way you can sell a property, sell an investment property, and buy another investment property. As long as you transfer that money without paying capital gains taxes on the money that you've made. There's a timeline to this. You have to start it like 45 days in advance. I can't tell you how many times people told me like the week of settlement, oh, I want to do a 1031 exchange. Too late. Like you had to start that already. So this is the kind of thing you want to look for. If it's not their principal residence, see if that's an option for them. Withholding tax. So withholding tax is reserved for out-of-state sellers. For an individual, it's 7.5%. For an LLC, it's like 8.25%. The way we look for that, and it's 7.25% of the proceeds. So if the seller's proceeds money gets held. The way we look for that is we compare the premise address to the mailing address on STT. If the mailing address is out of state, capital gains could be a factor. Now there's ways around it. If you look on your checklist, it's towards the bottom. There is a way to file for an exemption. Again, you have to do it at the beginning of the process. It takes 21 days, and I mean it takes 21 days exactly. They don't rush it. They don't do it fast for you. It takes 21 days. And just the rule of thumb when you're talking to your client, if they paid income tax in the state of Maryland, there's a good chance they could get an exemption or partial exemption. If they've never paid income tax in the state, state's probably going to take 7.5% of their proceeds. So that's just kind of generally how it works. Plat references. I think it's good professional courtesy to put the plat in your disclosures on your listings, especially if you're dealing with a big chunk of land. People always just seem to ask for it. Sometimes, like in this case, you can see a plat reference. You'll see a number here that you can go to plat.net and use. It's not always there. Sometimes we can find the deed and we can read about it in the deed. We can find a plat reference and use it. Sometimes, I'll do it, and I'll show you to do this. Do an advanced search and look for the community itself.
I get asked this quite often.
Yeah.
At open houses, people are asking me, do you have the plat
There
records?
you go.
And I go into MLS and I'm just like, I don't see anything here, so this is helpful for me.
I love it. So
Yes.
open house,
Yes.
plat, business cards, do it. Here you go. You know. Front foot. Okay, this one stinks sometimes. If you don't disclose it, the seller has to pay it. I believe it's how it's written. If there's a front foot producer benefit and flat. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. So what front foot benefit is? It is the cost of connecting a property to like public water and public sewer. I took your sheet. Sorry. You'll see it on new construction. Sometimes the builder will just build that into the price. Sometimes the builder will put in the deed and make people more or less pay for it over the next 30 years. The way we find out if the front foot's going to be a factor. Sometimes it'll be in the deed. We'll find it directly in the deed. It'll say subject to front foot price, everything. Sometimes I got to look in the plat. I got to find the plat, and there's a reference to it in the plat, and the notes of the plat. Sometimes it's built into the tax. That makes it really easy. Sometimes you don't have to stress about it too much. It's already in the tax bill. And just a quick rule of thumb. What's the longest front foot you've ever seen, Ali? 50 years, maybe? Most of them are 20 years, 30 years. This house is built in 1804. There's no front foot benefit. You know, like you don't even have to consider it. Like you can rule it out. It's gone. If the property has well and septic, it's usually not front foot. But if it's connected to something else, that's kind of how we rule it out.
But we see property that have septic and well.
Yes. So actually, that's a good point. Sometimes I've seen people they're connected to city water, but they have a septic system. You still have to try. We would still look and see how that water got there, I guess you could say, if they're still paying for it or not.
Okay.
So that's something that if we called you, you could research and look up, or if the owner doesn't know.
Right. And that's a big thing. I would like you to know about it before you go to the meeting, right? You can ask the owner, but so many people, I don't know this, you know, that if the key word, I guess you could say, when I give you the report, I say there's no evidence of front foot, like I don't find any evidence, but you still ask the owner do you make a payment to a company, usually with the word utility in the name? The servicer has something utility. So like I tell them, go to Bank of America, go look at your statement for last year, just search for the word utility, see what, just make sure nothing comes up.
Excuse me. Did you say well and septic equals no front foot? But then Paula said that some people have well and septic.
Yeah, the house is generally over 30 years old or on well and septic. This usually not a front foot benefit.
If it's
But
not-
just because it has, sometimes you can be on well, but still on sewer, or sometimes you can be have a septic system but be connected to public water. So you just have to keep an eye for both. That's rare. It is rare, but it happens.
So Chris, you referenced also that the front foot fee may actually be reflected on the tax bill, the tax record.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's in the tax.
Like in Howard County, most of the front foot fees are paid as part of your taxes.
Yes, most of them. Most.
Will it actually say front foot? This is complicated. Will it actually say front foot on the?
Yes.
Say that word? Because I never even heard that till this.
Or user benefit, they call it user assessment sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And did you, how did you find out about that?
It was a part of the disclosure that the listing agent had.
Oh,
Oh,
was that?
It was a part of the disclosure that the listing agent had. I had one in Harper County.
You got it, like I said, if it exists, you got it. I'm gonna skip that. Because we're talking about. All right.
So we can search for all these things. We should search, we should do our best to try to find all of this ourselves. And then you could help us by we could come to you and you could say, oh, you missed this, or this isn't right. And how,
Yes, Zoomland, the question was, should we do this ourselves and then ask you? Yes. In the beginning, I want you to ask me.
okay.
I want you to know how to do it. I want you to understand how everything works. I think it's something you should practice,
Yeah.
especially new agents to practice this. But give it to us. Like let us do it with you. We'll tell you what we found, and then you can see if you kind of matched up. Just
Okay.
I think the more you understand how this stuff works, the better. And one day, you may not be here, and you're gonna have to do it yourself. Hopefully. Maybe the Zoom questions.
Okay, so Zoom question. Are we able to receive a copy of the website listing? And that's from Devon.
Yes, email Brian Harper and we'll send it out. SteveHarper@closeshirt.com. We'll send you all the resources. Come on. We'll send you this easy to read checklist. And it grows every day. Every day we add to it, by the way. Send you the updates as well.
Well, why does it grow? What are you actually? How does it,
So like I added the site to figure out if a property is, if a condo is FHA approved.
oh, okay.
Like something that comes up.
Obscure things that never happened before that.
Yep. And I'm like, I want this to never happen again. How do I solve it? I solve it by telling people, and then knowing how to do it. And I look for it. So when I learn something, I will put it on. You got it. All right, the land records themselves are, they're indexed by name, except for Baltimore City, they're indexed by property address. But for every other county, you log into the site that they've given you, you select your county, then you put in the current owner's name. First, we always do the current owner first, and then work backwards. Now, I just want to real quick throw this out there. The first thing we're looking for is a deed or an assignment. That's where we kind of start our search. Does anybody know the difference between a deed and an assignment?
A deed is for a fee simple property, and an assignment is for something that has rent land.
Usually ground rent, yeah. Usually assignment has ground rent attached to it.
So we would find that like in Baltimore often. City.
Baltimore, Anne Arundel County has a few. There's a few in
Okay.
Howard. There's a few, like they developed a few areas as well.
Okay,
And Frederick, I've seen a few in Frederick too.
so would it have both a deed and an assignment, or one or the other?
It should have, if it has, it should just be an assignment.
Okay,
Now, I will say this. We keep going back. I keep going backwards when I think places might have ground rent. Just because a lot of title companies in the 2000s did a really bad job. And they would record a deed, even though it was supposed to be assignment. They wouldn't mention anything about the ground rent. So people think they don't have ground rent, but they actually do. And there's a lot of out-of-state title companies. They don't know how this stuff works. They just record whatever. So we have to go back and check. I will tell you on SDAT.
And I have another question when you finish.
There, my bad. So on SDAT, you can see here, sometimes you get lucky too. The ground rent's registered, it's recorded right there. You get the information. Sometimes it's been redeemed, which means the person paid to make it go away, and you'll find it there too. So sometimes it's there.
Okay, and if you, and I'm not trying to take you off task, but could you just kind of like briefly explain ground rent? Because I keep seeing ground rent. And so in my head, I'm thinking you buy this house, I have to pay rent to someone for the ground, or so just kind of clear that up for me and anyone else who may not.
I might call Ali on this one.
Oh.
I mean, I think she nailed it. I mean, yeah, you're buying the real estate, you're buying the improvement, but the land technically is owned by somebody else. And usually the rent is like $90 a year.
Yeah,
or
it's
something
not.
ridiculous. It's just an inconvenience, and that's why you can redeem it. There's a statutory process, and it's
But how does that happen? How does someone own the ground and not the property? I'm not able to make that connection.
It's something they did 100 years ago. Every one of these is like
okay.
100 years old.
Okay,
And it's just, that was it. I own this ground, but I'm gonna let you build a house on it and own the house and all that other stuff. So it's
okay.
it's
Apply for specific places or apply for all houses?
specific places.
Oh.
Like I said, Baltimore City, there's a lot of them. But you always gotta look. And they're not really, they're in Maryland.
some commercial properties in Maryland too, Howard County.
Yeah, they're not like, this is kind of unique to our area too, unfortunately.
And so there was a community in Jessup called New Colony Village.
Yep,
It was
that's-
built in the 2000s, I believe. And they actually developed that land and all the homes were ground rent.
Yep.
And so then some 10 years later, the homeowners were given the opportunity to redeem their ground rent after the new because they weren't receiving the values of all the other people that were getting double the money on their properties because it was just the structure and not the entire property itself,
Yep.
including structure. So once they redeemed it, now an equivalent house that's sold for 300,000 or 350, they too would get that 350 instead of only 195.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah, those are the last, that's what I was referring to. Those are the last ones I've seen.
Yeah.
There's a few in Anne Arundel too, but. So that's what we look for there.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
someone on Zoom said before we had lenders, it was to subsidize the purchase of the home.
Oh.
Fun fact.
What is assignment of deed of trust? I see deed of trust, assignment, then I see assignment. It's a board.
Good question. So what is the difference between all these things? So the assignment or the deed is how you transfer the property. A deed of trust is Maryland's way of saying mortgage, I guess you could say. It's the mortgage to the property. And I'm gonna go into, for the sake of time here, I'm gonna explain why those are important too. So one of the things we'll do when we do a search for somebody, the way land records work is every time you see a deed of trust, you typically see a release once it's paid off. Banks are supposed to record a release saying that this loan has been paid. Again, in the 2000s, it was really sloppy. They would just, especially with lines of credit, they would just mail the release to the homeowner and say, your loan's paid, just make sure you record this in the land records. They wouldn't do it. So we have a lot of unreleased mortgages from back in the day. These can really slow down the deal. These can halt the deal. And this is one of those things that at some point in your career, you're gonna get a call from the title company, like the week of settlement, that says, I'm sorry, we can't close. We need a release for this whole mortgage. So I wanna help you get way in front of that. The way releases work, when they're recorded, you'll see here, it'll be like the property address and it'll reference a book and page. So we have to go back to the land records and check each book and page. So like this release applies to that deed of trust. This one applies to that, like works like that. Sometimes you see subordination agreement. Subordination agreement is when a second mortgage, when the person refinances and the second mortgage says, I'm gonna stay on as a second mortgage. They're taking second position on the loan. So in this scenario, this is, so we had somebody with an open mortgage from 2014, and then this one from 2003. It's a line of credit. And that was a line of credit that was not subordinated. That was probably paid off, or supposed to be paid off. So we were able to tell the seller, hey, do you remember getting anything? We pulled a copy of it. Do you remember getting anything from this bank? Like, did they send you a thing? No? Okay. Well, look, this could potentially slow down the deal. I'm gonna get my title company on. They're good at tracking releases. Or as soon as it goes under contract, first thing you do is you let that title company know. I know that this mortgage is unreleased. Get on it now. Some releases can take like 2 weeks. Some releases can take 30 days. So release is a big thing that we want to. Unreleased mortgage is a big thing that we want to track down before we get too far into the process.
What is the book? Where is the book? What book?
The book, it used to be a book in the land records, like physically recorded, and it was like volume, or so you go get that book and page
At the court.
at the courthouse, yeah, and you go, oh, here it is, here's that release, and that's how they used to do it. Now it's all online, at least in Maryland, so.
What's the difference between a deed of trust and a lien?
A deed of trust is generally a mortgage.
Mhm.
A lien could be, actually, I'll show you. A lien is it like you'll see a lien. In this case, it was an HOA lien. The person wasn't paying their HOA tax, their HOA each month. Look at this. This was person was going into their listing appointment and they saw all these liens. Like this was like $60,000 worth of unpaid HOA dues. That changes your net sheet a lot. Like if the seller's like, I don't know how much I owe. We have to figure that stuff out because that drastically changed how much they were going to make on the sale of the property. In some cases, it could go from a sale to a short sale because they owe so much money.
So did they have to pay the lien before they sold the property?
Before you transfer the property, you have to pay this off.
Mr. Breck,
Yes, sir.
along those lines too, the surprises that I've seen pop up is forbearance agreements, where seller doesn't mention it, and then the listing agent finds out that their client can't really settle because they can't come out of pocket with X amount because they had a forbearance that's not due.
I was gonna ask you, doesn't the seller know that they owe this money? Or how would they not know if they got notice? You have to get notice if you have a lien.
You get notice, but I mean, not everybody's good with money. Like, I don't know.
They're unpaid bills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is that common?
that's why banks escrow for taxes. That's why the bank wants to pay the taxes because
Wow.
they have to make sure it's done.
But people get notices for their,
Yeah.
but do they just try to
But
get
not all
away
the
with it? Is
time.
that what it is? Because people do know they owe bills.
They know, like in this one, I mean, like they had liens before that. Like, they got,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, some people just,
Yeah.
people get into money problems and the first thing they do, they stop paying the HOA, but they pay their mortgage,
Okay.
We got the advance bill, and we can pay partial, or we can pay the full amount for the taxes, the property taxes.
Yeah,
And we pay the half, but some people say, I wouldn't pay in the end of the year, but they probably didn't pay.
yeah.
The bill is came twice a year.
And so when they go to sell the house, that's when they realize, oh, wow, I have to pay all.
I owe this
and it's-
money.
and it's
And
our
those liens
job.
are still accumulate.
Yep, and what Ollie was mentioning of forbearance, that's, kind of like the foreclosure forgiveness, I don't know how you put it, but just, there would be, I guess, a chunk of money that they would forgive for now, but when you sell the house,
Oh.
you have to pay this back.
Mhm. Because you can transfer the properties that are,
What's that?
you can transfer the property if there's a lien. Yeah. In a property.
Right. The other thing that shows up a lot, and this is, my mom said this. sometimes we'll see this sentence right here, financial statements and amendments. And when we click on that, that is a solar panel.
Wow.
Or not necessarily lien, I'm sorry. It means the person has solar panels on their house and they don't own them. It's they either lease it or have a power purchase agreement. And when you see this, you want to disclose it because the buyer has to agree to assume it, or the deal doesn't go through. And it's good. It's good when you know about it because you can get a jump on it. Like we know Vivinet, Tesla services Vivinet. We go on the Tesla website. We can print we can come to the meeting with the link ready to go. Like let's just put this information in now and get the package going from Tesla. But a lot of times you want to get the power. You want to get the power purchase agreement. I always want to look at it because you want to see what they are actually paying for electricity. These guys did a great job selling this to people. They say like, oh, we'll put the equipment on, and then you just buy your electricity from us. We'll sell it to you for 9.1 cents a kilowatt hour. The average in Maryland is 13, so you're saving money. Well, in reality, it's 13 because on the Eastern Shore, it's 17 cents, per kilowatt hour. On our side of the bridge, it's 6 cents.
Oh.
So they have this agreement to more or less overpay for electricity, and it almost devalues the property. So it becomes an issue on your sale.
How common is it to see that solar panels are not owned by the actual people that don't buy them? Is it common to see that?
I would say more people lease it or have a power purchase agreement than actually
I
own
never
it.
would have known that.
Yeah.
You have to upgrade it.
Yeah, that's what I said. What people panel solar that they have to pay?
I just thought people were just buying them.
Right? No, those guys, they were good. They went door to door. They sold to people on it. And nothing. You don't gotta pay me nothing. I'll put these on your house. You're gonna go green, and then we're gonna save you money.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There was a comment in here about HOAs, if you want me to just.
Sure.
Okay. So there was a comment in here from Devon about HOA liens will come up on the SDAT or when we secure the HOA docs.
Sorry, what was the question?
It wasn't a question. It
Was it a
sounds like he's
statement?
just making a statement. I stepped out when you guys were talking about
Okay,
HOA,
that's
so I think he just wanted to.
Sometimes when you look on.
Hey Paula, it's Devin. It's a woman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate it.
I think she said it was a question.
It was a question. Okay. HOA, so Devin wants to know HOA liens will come up on the SDAT or when we secure the HOA docs.
I don't know that they'll come with your HOA docs, but they will come, if there is a lien, it'll come up in the land records, and the land record. That link, that's what we'll find those.
And also just like a point of practical guidance, I guess, because sometimes life gets ahead of us and we can't always pull up land records before a listing, a meeting or whatever. But if you're having that meeting and your potential seller seems a little frazzled, not in order, we've all got the clients that they've got every single bill filed and organized. They're probably the ones that are on top of their bills. But for the questions of how do these people not know they owe money or whatever, if you're asking them certain questions and they're clueless, then you may want to do your own deeper dive and take a look and just know your client and know your risk exposure, because it'll come back to you when you want to cash that commission check at settlement or when you want to get paid and you're finding out that you have all these last minute roadblocks.
Yeah, you get road.
Do the heirs of the business insurance cover that type of mistake?
It's not your mistake though. So
Oh, okay.
you didn't make a mistake.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
What do you mean? If you don't discover it, then you can't disclose it. Then that's errors and omissions.
You wouldn't necessarily have to disclose it. It has to be paid before it's transferred. But I mean, you don't have to disclose it to the buyer that this person has a lien. I mean, it's public record. Actually, they can go figure it out themselves too.
The buyer's not inheriting that debt. It has to be paid at settlement, so it becomes an obstacle in order to get through settlement. And a lot of times your client's gonna play dumb and say, I didn't know about it, and you don't wanna have that conversation right before settlement.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want them to get less money than they thought. And you don't want to do all this work and get to the tape, get right there and realize, oh, this deal can't close. They're short,
Which happens, and we have agents. that are in
Happens
that
a lot.
situation.
happens a lot, unfortunately.
And if you can't close the deal to get the money to go back and pay the lien, you have to pay the lien before you close the deal.
Mhm. We'll put it on the settlement statement.
So you pay the, no.
Yeah,
You
when-
can pay
when-
the-
I know you are.
Mhm.
So we talked about HOA liens. All right, I did want to jump back here, guys. Sorry, I don't want to go around too much. When we talk about reading, I want to go back to front for benefit. When we pull the deed, sometimes we get super lucky. And some of these newer ones, we have to read everything. We have to actually read the deed. We read the legal description of the property, and then there's information in there. Sometimes we'll get super lucky, and there's a section that says subject to. That's underneath that. In this case, this deed is actually referencing how much the front for benefit is, when it's due, where it goes, and all that. So it's easy to disclose. In this case, this was a buyer asking me how much they had left to pay. I was able to calculate it. So I did just want to jump back and talk about that before we got too far away from front for benefits. All right. You ever go to a property? You ever notice that some signs are green, some signs are blue? You ever see that?
Mm.
You ever notice that? Anybody know the difference?
What's on, Columbia Association property?
Possibly, yeah. One is like a county road, a city road. What do you think blue ones are?
Private
The
roads.
private roads. A lot of times they're private roads.
You're right.
That's just an indication. If you're on a private road, a lot of lenders these days, especially if you share that with anybody else, are requiring that there's a private road maintenance agreement in place. Private road maintenance agreement basically says, all right, we'll split the costs. We both have access, whatever. Ollie could probably dive into it some more, but it's just basically an agreement for everybody that lives off of this private road to maintain it. Unfortunately, some of the stuff is so old that it's always just assumed that you're allowed to use it. But lenders want to see guaranteed access, guaranteed that somebody's going to repair it, somebody's going to fix it. So we'll look for that on the property and make sure that agreement is in place. I mentioned that sometimes I use the GIS, what's it stand for? Geographic information system, whatever. This is the map, right? So I'll use the map to look at the property before when I'm doing like a preliminary review. Sometimes I'll see cool stuff like this. So like this property, this person's listing this house. This little chunk here was listed as private road. I don't know what the appraiser's going to say when they see that. I looked up every one of these houses to see if anybody had an agreement to maintain that, use that. So at least we were able to be ahead of it. You may need to talk to everybody that lives on this street. And that was what I just showed you there. That was the deal we did. We had to get everybody to agree that we'll maintain this. You have to get it in writing that whoever owns these properties will monetarily maintain this little chunk of road here. Sometimes you can't close a deal. Sometimes you can't get a loan if you don't have that. So we want to be on top of those things. We want to be in front. Here's another thing I want to show you. So I go to plats.net, I pull the plat, right? I'm looking at this one. Everything looks fine. The neighborhood, everything's indicated, proper location, shorefront, whatever. This is why I use Google Maps sometimes too. So when I look at this plat, we're talking about lot 28 here. They want to sell this house. It looks like they should have their own driveway, and they have a driveway here. I looked at it. I kind of only saw one driveway. So I'm like, I think you're using his driveway, and that could be a problem. You two may get along now, but if whoever buys this house next could not want you to do that, put a fence right down the middle of this thing or something, So we were able to just have a discussion, like these neighbors were able to discuss like, oh, this guy should be using this as his driveway. Clearly he's not. There's like trees there and everything else. So they got the ball rolling on an agreement between the two of them so that if somebody came in there to buy it, they would be able to get financing and it wouldn't be a deal breaker for them. That's when Google Maps put me in, because I don't get to go to the property to see it. You guys do. So just be on the lookout for that kind of stuff too. I know it's a lot, and that's why I say send it to us. Like before you go on your very first appointment, listing appointment especially, give us the property address. Let us do some preliminary stuff. We're sweeping for minds. We're just looking for potential major issues, and we're looking for something that can make you look good. My job is to make you look good. I want you to be teacher's pet. You're going in there first day of school. I've already done my homework for the first month. That's what we're trying to help you guys do.
Okay.
Yes.
In that situation there, so you stated that you would have to work it out with those two owners to come up with some sort of agreement, that it would be separately divided if it would be sold. How does that agreement happen? I mean, do they have to pay for an attorney? Do they have to?
That's a great question.
I
I think it's a great time to transition.
Alright.
So the question was, what do you do? What do you do if there's presumably
And
people?
who pays for it? If they not a fee.
Yeah, and who pays for it? Does the county, I mean, who would want to pay for it? And then who makes the contract?
Who would want to pay? So the question is, how do you do it? Where do you get it? How do you pay for it?
Yeah.
Well,
And if they don't want to do it.
we're gonna throw.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, what are you gonna?
So this is Ali. Ali is he's our attorney. He's a real estate attorney. He focuses strictly on you guys getting your stuff in order.
That's right.
And this is like a best case scenario.
You're gonna have to step over here.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you finished, Chris? Or
He's never finished.
I'm
I'm
not.
not gonna.
But I'll be supposed to go on at 4:30. So
No, I
We
can go
can
on.
handle it together.
yeah.
But hello, everyone. Viewers around the world.
Ah.
Those there. Chris Breck is here. You know they're watching from every continent.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
So this is like a best case scenario. And sometimes, especially like out in the country, Frederick County, we'll get this with like a farm that was chopped in and they made 7 or 8 houses. And a rule of thumb, you're either gonna find out about this right away because you're aware of it. You drive down the street and you say, man, Chris told me to look out for these things. Let me make sure there's a private easement agreement, private road agreement, whatever. There are a couple different names. Or you're gonna find out about it right before settlement, when the lender says, and literally like right before settlement, the last week, where they say, we need a private road agreement. And keep in mind that in order to get this private road agreement, really everybody affected has to sign off. So whoever the owners are, both of these properties, if it's husband and wife, multiple owners, they all have to sign, they all have to get it notarized. You better pray that they all get along, that it's not an estranged spouse that's living somewhere else. Pray that they're local. Really, technically, the lenders should get involved because they have a secured interest. So it can get sticky, and don't trust the lender to bring this to your attention promptly. They're going to be negligent, and they're going to bring it up at the last minute. Hello, Mr. Turner. In terms of who's going to pay for it, nobody wants to pay for it. So it's a point of discussion, point of negotiation between buyer and seller. I would say it's the seller's responsibility, but the seller survived that whole time without needing it, and it's now the buyer's lender that's requiring it. So
But who's gonna
Looks
put
like
those
it's falling
pieces
on the
together? We
buyer.
should go to all the people and say, hey, will you sign this? Hey, will you sign this? Hey, who does that? Whose burden is that?
nobody wants to, but it's a lot of times the real estate agent that wants to get paid says, I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna go and usher this around and try to get it signed. But
So
again,
they're
And I've had to do that.
Okay, so.
I've had to go door to door. But
Okay, so.
that shows you Chris is nicer than me. I've never had to do that.
Did you already have some sort of a contract to present to them, saying you can use this as a sample, or did you just, I mean, what?
Yeah, how will like the decision
Did
get
you
made?
tell them,
Because
what are you telling them to do?
There's a few.
So it's
different-
pretty standard. I mean, there's not gonna be anything exotic. It's, hey, these affected owners are gonna split all maintenance costs and whatever. Where it gets more exotic, this is a nice visual. I gotta learn from you on how to do it. this is pretty standard, I mean, even where the houses are about the same off the road. It's much more complicated when it's those lots that are like this, where you have a chain of them, and this person over here is using the whole road, while this person is only using that.
Okay.
So there's no one size fits all. It's gonna be whatever the parties can negotiate, and it's a private maintenance agreement. It's between the affected parties, so they could say whatever they want. There's nothing, no law that says here's what it's gonna be.
And if all don't sign, if all don't agree,
If they don't all agree, you're not gonna get a signed document.
and that means the deal falls.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we don't see deals fold because of this, I don't think.
What will that try?
I've had to have some conversations with lenders about.
He said, he sent some good emails.
Yeah.
Letter to get there.
So it's not a violation for the agent to somewhat act as an attorney to go to those houses and say, here's a contract that you could use to, that just basically.
Well, you're not acting as an attorney because you didn't draft it. You're just facilitating signatures if you want.
Oh.
At that point, it's been drafted by an attorney, and you can facilitate signatures.
Okay, somebody hires an attorney to draft it and you can.
Yes.
Okay,
So sometimes Ali can step in if the lender would change their mind.
okay.
I've had scenarios where they wouldn't change their mind. We had to make the agreement, we'd go to the neighbors, we'd get them to sign it, get it recorded, and then we could sell the property.
So that means when it snowed, that they all agreed that they would get a show.
That's right, I like it. When it snows, they all agree that they'll get a shovel.
Yeah. And on the topic of obstructions or obstacles towards the end of the process, right before settlement, one issue that we see more often than it should is a lender saying, we're not gonna settle on time. And this is, I don't have any prepared remarks, but this is my own little one-man mission to empower real estate agents to not be at the mercy of lenders. Because the way that a traditional real estate transaction works is we all do our work, we get the signed contract, we hand it off to a title company. Title company starts working immediately, does the title work, and gets everything ready to settle. And title companies can close in like 8-10 days, really. Right?
Sure.
10 days.
We have to, don't ask
Yeah.
us that.
We don't want to, but we could. And title companies front load a lot of the work. And most importantly, they look at the settlement date and they have respect for the settlement date. You can agree on that.
I agree with that.
Absolute respect for the settlement date because there's a contractual obligation between the parties. The missing link to all of this is the bank really caring about the settlement date. Some lenders do, but the majority of them don't, especially the ones that we can drive by their locations. Bank of America, Wells Fargo. These folks, they say, that's cool that that's what you want for your settlement date. We'll try, but we'll see what we can do. That's pretty much their approach. So I have a gift for all of you. This is a very, I love it. It's a letter that has, I think you've seen it, sir.
I'll pass.
Oh, thank you. But it's a letter that we've used, and it's to be used if you're a listing agent and you have a buyer or a lender saying, well, we're not gonna close on time. The lender just can't close on time. You can pretty much cut and paste this email, and we've had a high accuracy or a high success rate. Because what it is that the lender is telling the buyer, hey, I can finance your house and give me 30 days and we'll get this to settlement. And they think that because they're bringing the money, everybody is going to listen to whatever they say. So, and you guys can read it later, don't worry about stuff. But, well, what this is saying is basically warning the lender, hey, we're not going to just rubber stamp an extension. Lenders are very used to saying, we're gonna extend settlement, we're not getting the settlement on time. And they're used to everybody saying, oh my gosh, the lender can't close, we're gonna postpone for a week. This letter is my attempt at changing that dynamic, telling the lender, we're not gonna do that. I'm the listing agent, we're not agreeing to an extension. You're going to do your job, you're gonna work really hard to get to this settlement date. And if you don't, your client is in breach of contract, and my client very well may go after them. That's what the contract says. The contract between the buyer and seller says, we're gonna go to settlement on this day, we're gonna do all this stuff, and we're gonna bring money to settlement. And the lender is saying, I'm gonna represent this buyer, I'm gonna get them the money. And then they just don't care about that date. And what they're doing by saying, oh, we need an extension, or we can't settle on time. Another way of saying that is, I'm about to put my borrower in a position of being in breach of the contract. And this brings that to their attention and lets them know you were negligent in not getting the money to the title company on time and potentially causing a settlement. So if you send an email like this, usually the first thing that whoever receives it does is clicks to escalate it to somebody else. And then some supervisor gets it and says, okay, let's figure out how to get this to settlement. And 9 times out of 10, you don't need an extension because they realize, actually, this is accurate and this is correct. And we don't want that. It's way easier for us to push aside these other files, focus on this one, get this one done. Because what they're doing is they're just taking it from one desk to the other, to the other, to the other, and they're just slow about it. So anyways, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to comment on this, that I actually lived this. I was the buyer. My crappy lender did not do everything that he was supposed to do to make sure that I got to settlement on time. And so they were telling the seller that, hey, we need to extend this. The seller did put my house back on the MLS as active. I cannot tell you how frightening that is, considering all of the money that I had already spent and appraisals, inspections and everything else, just to see my house back active on the MLS. I then had to come out of my pocket with an additional non-refundable $2,000 for a new settlement date that said, if you don't keep this date, I'm taking your 2,000, which I'm already taking your 2,000 and keeping it, and we're done with this. So I lived this.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that the lender just thinks like they are the big gorilla in the room and everybody's going to do whatever they desire. So that's my little point about that.
Ali, so
Yes, ma'am.
I had an issue with the lender pushing out our date because they didn't submit the closing disclosure within 3 days. So are we able to bypass that? Does it have to be 3 days if the buyer says, I'm okay, 24 hours?
No, you can't wait.
Okay.
Something.
And taking a quick step back, now that I'm looking at notes and not just jumping into fun stuff, a little bit of background. I'm an attorney, as Chris mentioned. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed as a real estate agent since 2005. I got my law degree in 2007. And in the world of attorneys, there are 2 big sections, I suppose. There are litigators and there are transactional attorneys. So transactional attorneys don't really see a courtroom. They do document review. They review contracts, they draft contracts, they review paperwork, they give opinions on paperwork, etc. Litigators go to court. So our office, we are litigators, we go to court, we argue cases, etc. We have the benefit of having this relationship where we get to be a resource for you guys as real estate agents, for any questions you have, etc., because of the relationship between Assurance and Keller Williams. So when you guys have questions, you need something, I'm here, our office is here, to give you that guidance. And the cool thing about that is, I feel fortunate in that whatever your questions are, usually I can picture what that question will look like in front of the judge. And we have had it where I give my 2 cents and then our agent goes off and then comes back and says, Ali, I appreciate what you said, but this attorney said blah, blah, blah. And I welcome those opportunities because usually that agent is wrong. I don't mean to be arrogant or whatever, but they're just usually wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. I love that as a real estate agent, I've been through the process of listing a property, going to settlement. I know what all of our agents go through. And then I also know what the words on the paper mean if it doesn't go well and it ends up in a courtroom. So I'm a real estate agent. In 2013, I moved my license from where it was with another brokerage into this beautiful facility. So I am an agent in this office with you guys as well. I think I already said it, but calling me, you're not on the clock. Anybody else outside of this, they call me, they're a retained client, and they have to pay to talk to me. They have to pay for emails. You guys don't. So Because of assurance, working with Keller Williams Realty Center, you guys get me no charge. I love that because I love real estate. I love every component of it.
And he answers the phone.
I try. I mean, there's a couple of you and there's one of me, so I'm outnumbered, but I do my best. Things that we help with. So a point Chris made, Chris said that he wants you to look like a teacher's pet, wants to throw it down and have you hand in a month worth of homework on the front end. That's the vision that I had. I love that. I like to be a little more violent and aggressive. I like to say Navy SEALs. Like, we want you guys to be the best out there. And just prepared for anything. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if we can get it on the front end, that's what a lot of what he's saying is, before your listing appointment, before this, before that, get ready, train yourself. You're doing the right thing by being here, watching on Zoom, and just refining your skills, sharpening your skills. And when these little warning signs pop up, you're going to be ready. One of those ways to be prepared is knowing what your limits are. You're a real estate agent, you're not a structural engineer, you're not an attorney. Your client's going to want you to be a cardiologist and all kinds of other stuff. You're not, you're a real estate agent. So if they have some kind of fancy request, I want to make sure that blah, 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 insert whatever craziness here. Give us a call, say, hey, my client wants to do this, or we see it like new construction. The builder wants to go to settlement, but they still need to pave the driveway and they need to plant the trees and whatever else. We need to draft an addendum. Give us a call. We don't want you guys drafting something. We'll do the drafting. In those binds where I'm not available on the phone and you just have to get something out, a couple pointers, please follow these things. Look at the contract. An addendum is like piggybacking onto the contract. Like on the first page of the contract, you're going to have defined terms. So lot 28 is going to be called, 123 Fort Hills Drive, but on the contract, it's defined as the property with a capital P. So if you're drafting an addendum, picture it in front of a judge. Don't say the house, don't say real estate, say the property with a capital P. It's a defined term, it's precise, it looks good, makes you look good. If you're in court, your client's in court, they're not going to look at it and say, who drafted this? And no good deed goes unpunished. So if you're the one trying to put your neck on the line to accommodate your client and make your client happy because they want to specify that the Tiffany chandelier stays, but if they do, like, when it gets weird, give us a call. If it's a sticky situation, confusing, let me know. Shoot me an email, give me a call. And we can draft whatever, or once in a while an agent calls and says, hey, here's the scenario. And we'll say either an addendum is not appropriate, or you can't do that, it's against the law. But getting us involved lets us work out those hazards in advance. If you notice like your stress levels going high, something's making you uncomfortable, client's asking you to do something that is not routine, you haven't done it before, give us a call. Usually it's not your job. They're asking you to do something that's unethical, unlawful, whatever. Or we need somebody else, like a surveyor. Especially in this market where there's such a huge disconnect. It's not a balanced market. You don't have like an equal number of buyers and sellers. So I've seen a lot of craziness, seller greed, buyer remorse. So you don't want to be the bad person after that buyer moves in and they're saying, well, why didn't my agent catch this and this and that? Get us involved on the front. Another cool thing for you guys to do, these contracts are drafted by the Maryland Realtors for the most part, unless you're going down in certain areas and then you have other associations drafting them. When you can, use the Maryland Realtors contract. That's the one I like. I think it's the best in terms of how it's drafted. And it's drafted to be equal, even-handed between buyers and sellers. It's not pro-buyer, pro-seller. And read it. You're going to use it all the time. You don't need to be an attorney, but just being familiar with it, a general understanding. And you never want to give your client legal advice and tell them, what all of it means, but just know where you could turn to. Hey, do I need to go to settlement? Do I need to take my furniture out of the property? I can't give you legal advice, but paragraph 22, 21 is the property condition paragraph. Speaking of which, try not to use the Maryland Realtors as is addendum unless you are crossing out certain language. If you pull up the Maryland Realtors, see, if I had fancy slideshow, I'd be flashing it up there, showing the language. But the Maryland Realtors as is addendum, and these are kind of just highlights of things that we see and issues that come to us. Right now, we want to be aggressive with our buyers. We want to win. So we are telling our buyers, let's submit as is, no inspections, all this stuff. The risk involved in doing that is that the Maryland Realtors contract says the seller is going to give the property in room clean condition. It really only says it in one place, and I think it's paragraph 21. And it says the seller will deliver the property in room clean condition, meaning they're going to get the furniture out, they're not going to break anything, and it's going to be like the buyer saw it, but cleared out. The Maryland Realtors, as his addendum says, all that's done. We're deleting all that. So a seller who decides that they want to leave the broken down car in the front yard,
Wow.
or the mattress in the bedroom, and the bags of trash all over, and the pantry half full. If your buyer walks in to the walkthrough and sees all that, and is frustrated because they have this expectation, they know, hey, it's supposed to be broom clean. No, you agreed that paragraph 21 is deleted. So the only spot that says that it's going to be broom clean was stricken from the contract. So if you're going to use the as-is addendum to try to make your offer look really appealing and enticing, delete that language. And it's really easy to spot which language it is. It's just the bolded language at the top of the page of the intro paragraph. You delete that, have everybody initial, and then you can still use the rest of it where it says, hey, we're buying the property as is, but we have a right to inspect, or we're waiving the right to inspect. So you're buying it as is, but the seller still has a responsibility to hand it over in clean condition. Gives you a balance. Without that, you're waiving rights that your client has no idea that they're waiving and didn't intend to waive. Mr. Breck, anything on that?
That was like, for me, that was pretty cool.
All of this is aha.
No, I'm talking a little fast, so I tried to slow it down. One of the most, and I'm not saying anything I've got to say is aha, but one of the things that agents tell me I'm wrong about, and unfortunately learn, I don't know, that I'm not wrong, is HOA documents. So, and I'm sorry if I'm a broken record, if people have heard me say the same thing over and over, but you'd be amazed at how many times we still have the same issues popping up. Homeowners association documents and condo documents, by law, the buyer is entitled to a copy of it. It's the Maryland Homeowners Association Act and Maryland Condo Act. Those laws are almost parallel, and they say something to the effect of, seller shall deliver to buyer a copy of all documents related to the association. We as real estate agents, we get comfortable acting as an agent. We can do ministerial acts. We can take a check from here to there. We don't have to do that too often anymore, but we can help our clients in little ways. One of those ways has always been, oh, I'll order the documents for you. You know, I'll transfer the documents over to the buyer. Makes us look good, you know. We're adding value. Board of Appeals, Maryland Board of Appeals has said that the HOA Act and the Condo Act is a consumer protection statute. As such, it is to be strictly construed, meaning no deviation, no variation. You have to follow it to a T. So that agent that wants to be helpful, the listing agent that's going to order the documents and then send it to the buyer's agent and get these documents signed and then get that transmittal of documents signed, has just made sure that their client is not complying with the law. And the problem is that a buyer has, I think it's 5 days to terminate the contract, 5 days from the date that they receive these documents. So Maryland courts have held that when the agents get involved, the seller has not delivered the documents to the buyer. And by the seller not delivering the documents to the buyer, the clock never started. So up until 10 seconds before settlement, the buyer can terminate with no recourse. So thinking about that from the buyer's side, and you guys are educating yourselves, one request I have is spread the word to agents within the office, educate ourselves, make ourselves the elite forces. You don't need to educate any agent outside of this office. Knowledge is power, use it for your advantage. So if you're representing a buyer and the listing agent says, Mike, Sally, I'm gonna shoot you over the HOA docs. Can you give me the transmittal sign? Sure, all day, because the clock is never gonna start. So accept those documents, hand them off to your client, and send them the notice of transmittal. The notice of transmittal doesn't change anything. Your client can have the documents and acknowledge the documents. Tell a judge, I got the documents. I got the documents 8 months ago. That doesn't matter. If the seller has not delivered to the buyer those documents, the clock never starts. And the reason that this is counterintuitive, because we're agents, we're used to doing things for our clients, you're not allowed to. So on the buyer side, if the documents were delivered through the agents, the clock never started. When we get calls from our agents saying, Ali, my buyer wants to back out, settlement's supposed to be in 3 days. My first question is there an HOA or condo association? When they say yes, I feel a sense of comfort immediately because 99% of the deals, they're not doing it properly. I think we are almost the only agents out there that try to do it correctly. And doing it correctly from the listing side looks like this. Getting the buyer's email address. As agents, we think we're territorial about our client's info. And we think, no, you can't have that. This is my client's email address. What am I going to do? Sneak up on them? Visit their house because I've got their email address? So you
Find
would
that land regs, don't you?
land regs? Okay.
I would do.
So if you're the listing agent, you let the other side know even before contract ratification. Hey, great, we're almost buttoned up, but I know the Maryland Realtors contract, it's got that section for your client's info, the buyer's information. My office requires, for compliance, we require the buyer's email address. Why? It's my client. I don't want you contacting them. No, I get it. We're not going to contact them. We're not adding them to a sphere of influence. We're not going to market to them. We're not doing anything. It's your client. There are rules of professional conduct, code of ethics that preclude us from reaching out to their client. We're not trying to do that. And you can give these bits of information to them to reassure them. It's compliance. You don't need to educate them and say, well, according to the Maryland Condominium Association Act, seller needs to deliver directly to the buyer. If they absolutely won't give an email address, usually they've submitted an EMD that's got an address. Hey, is that the valid address? My office needs to know for compliance. All right, cool. FedEx it to the buyers. But do not order the documents for your client. Do not take the documents from your client electronically or physically and send it to the buyer's agent, etc. Because I will tell you, we have used this law to get our clients, our buyers, out of transactions where they didn't want to proceed. And in the absence of this law, they would be in breach of contract for deciding at the 11th hour that they don't want to purchase.
So-
You can give the email address to your seller, and then can you tell them to just CC you, and then they send the documents directly to the buyer, but you're on the CC, so you can, that's okay. As long as
Yeah, you don't even need to be CC'd as long as your seller has done it.
right, then they can forward it to you, just approve it, okay.
Yeah, and if your seller says, hey, I sent it, I didn't get a bounce back,
Okay,
and here's the date that I sent it or whatever. And keep in mind that seller to buyer, so no intermediaries. So let your client know, hey, I can't do this for you, and it's gonna be tempting, but home docs or condo certs or whatever these websites are gonna make it so easy. Enter buyer's email address here. Wow, I can save a step. Don't.
okay.
Seller receives it, delivers it to the buyer.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I don't know if this may be a little bit off from this, but so say that a seller has documents from way back when they bought the house. And they don't want to buy it. Can they use those, or is there something that's maybe been updated that?
Order a resale package.
Okay.
Could have been some changes.
Yeah, there could have been changes, and your question is very valid because, and my annoyance is not at you, my annoyance is at the greedy seller that's cashing out top dollar and wants to save $250 or whatever it might be. It used to be totally out of hand. For years, the costs of these were escalating. And Maryland came out with a law that said, hey, here's the cap. So it's not as bad as it used to be. Sellers don't want to pay this, but hey, while we're on the topic of things that sellers should pay for and stop trying to cut corners, smoke detector law. This is not just a disclosure. Our sellers are not just supposed to receive this form, acknowledge that the smoke detector law is there, and then proceed with selling their house. The smoke detector law says any property transferred after such and such date has to have all this stuff. And the smoke detectors that it specifies are not the ones sold in Home Depot. 9 out of 10 of them usually that are sold at Lowe's or Home Depot don't comply with Maryland's smoke detector law. Yeah, wow.
So where do
Wow.
you, I mean, I don't think you don't
It's
know.
hard, but even on Amazon, 95% of them are not compliant. I mean, if you read the law, it's gotta be lithium ion backup, it's gotta be interconnected. So unless you're selling like a studio apartment that's got no hallways and no whatever, it's gonna be complicated to have it be interconnected, to have it have a lithium ion backup battery, and if it's a location where there was a hard wire, to have it be hardwired as well. So you've got all these criteria. And if you go into Home Depot right now, 50% of them have 9-volt batteries. The others are not interconnected. The few that they have that have lithium ion batteries aren't interconnected. So the little Maryland Realtors form, it's gonna save you guys because it's gonna tell your seller, hey, I told you about this. But those sellers that wanna just look at it, initial and move on with life, hello. If that house burns down, they have a multi-million-dollar suit that they will lose. And if you guys, God forbid, ever know of a house that burns down after a recent settlement, please give them my number. Because,
We want to represent.
yeah, I don't do that kind of work, but it's a slam dunk of a case because 90+% of real estate transactions, I don't think are complying with the Maryland smoke detector law. We've got that form so cutely signed in so many transactions, but the sellers are not taking the step that's required by law to bring the property up to compliance. And again, it goes back to our customs and norms and what we're used to. We're not used to modernizing a property before settlement. You can get 90% too much. You can get the majority of things grandfathered in. You can't get smoke detectors grandfathered in.
So that would not fall on the inspector, the smoke detector?
It's gonna fall on the seller.
So
So what is the law? It's less than 10 years from when the,
So there's a very tidy Maryland Realtors form that lays it out with graphics and whatever. The law is that every bedroom has to have a smoke detector. Every floor has to have a smoke detector. There has to be one carbon monoxide detector in the house, I think. Everything has to be interconnected. Anywhere that there's a hardwired device has to remain a hardwired device. So you can't just unplug it and then put a battery one there. You can only use the 10-year sealed lithium ion battery backup. For your clients that want to start nitpicking and saying, I think I just replaced that one, forget you. Don't try to save that 50 cents because that one's not compliant, I promise you. just get rid of all of them and comply with the law from the ground up. And the form, honestly, is kind of confusing because the law is kind of confusing and the products aren't there to necessarily support it very easily. So I don't know.
So if it's hardwired, then it can be older than 10 years, or if
No,
it
none of
doesn't
them,
matter,
none of them can be, no.
older than 10
If you're
years.
selling a house, your seller should plan on replacing any smoke detectors that are there and adding smoke detectors. Because now their bedrooms have to have smoke detectors. And unless they were using the property as a rental, highly unlikely that they have smoke detectors in bedrooms. If they were using it as a rental, a lot of the local jurisdictions require smoke detectors in bedrooms before they'll give a rental license.
We
But-
have a Zoom question.
Okay.
Zoom question from Kevin Banks. What do you mean by interconnected?
Excellent question, Kevin. Interconnected means if one of them goes off, the rest of them go off. So little Johnny's bedroom's got some smoke in it. All the rest of the smoke detectors in the house are gonna alert anybody else that can hear it.
Is that a wireless internet? Is that wireless?
They have both types of technology. So hardwired devices can speak to each other through a wire. And then wireless devices have like a radio frequency that alert each other. And I was preaching this law for the longest time. And then there was an epiphany one day. I said, what a bozo I am, talking about smoke detectors all the time and the risk and all this stuff, while my own place is completely outdated and I don't have anything. So I went and I bought all the stuff and I've got them all laid out on a table. And they give you setup instructions and whatever. And to test it, you hit one and they're wireless. I mean, the ones that are wireless, you hit one and then you get a little Christmas tree, 5 or 6 of them lighting up. So it works wirelessly. It's they're speaking to each other.
Yeah, and I may have missed this out when I stepped out, but does it still pertain to as is home as well?
Yeah, it's not a law that can be waived. So
The house can be in shambles, but you have to have those.
yeah, but it's you know, in that scenario where if it's a tear down, if it's a fixer upper, then most likely the seller is, I mean, the buyer is not going to be able to document what was the condition, what was there. And if there was a fire, that's not as good of a lawsuit. Don't send that one to me. But the majority of transactions are not total shambles. So yeah, if they're tearing down the house, less of a risk. Yes,
What
sir.
about an estate sale?
I don't see a carve out in the law for an estate sale. So, I mean, maybe they have lower liability because it's an estate and the personal representative may have a bond insurance policy, I don't know, whatever. I don't handle too much trusted estates, but I think they still have to comply. Unfortunately. Because I know personal representative, I mean, they're not, it's not their full-time job, it's not their profession, they're usually just helping a family member, so that's kind of a hard ask, but I don't think they're exempt.
And another question.
Mhm.
What if the house was sold as is? Does that exempt the seller from smoke detector?
No.
No.
And it goes back to like a public policy standpoint, you know, the public policy being, we want to make properties safer. And the mechanism here was, if you're selling your house, that's the time that we're going to force you to do it. And from a public policy standpoint, hey, we want these houses to have modernized smoke detectors. You just bought your house?
Yes,
When?
June, last June.
Do you know if your smoke detectors are?
They are not.
Yeah.
I have a 9-volt battery in mine, so this is news.
Yeah, I think.
So
that
if my
it's-
house burned down, I could actually sue the seller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we pray it don't burn out.
Is that, can this be used as a loophole if you have a buyer? And listing agents, many listing agents are not aware of this law in its totality. So if they're saying there's absolutely no reason for us to change out the smoke detectors, so because it's been sold as is, and that's what you're gonna get. Okay, we're down to the final week, buyer gets cold feet anyways, and there's a situation where the smoke detector law isn't complied with, can they actually now walk away from this deal?
I would say no.
No.
So, and that ties into another good topic. again, what I'm doing is kind of consolidating a lot of like 45, 50-minute courses, classes that we've done at the office and giving you the highlights. One of those little classes is condition precedent. It's those magic words, condition precedent, mean if this doesn't happen, then that doesn't happen. So the only way your scenario I think would work is if you had an addendum saying the seller's compliance with Maryland's Smoke Detector Act is a condition precedent to the buyer's performance under the contract. In the absence of that, the only thing the buyer has in that scenario is basically a golden ticket if the house burns down after settlement to go after the seller. But they don't get a free pass out of performing under the contract and purchasing the property.
How long after summer?
How long
A year?
would they be able to sue?
Yeah,
I think years.
years.
If the house burns down, I think years.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Definitely a year. 2
Hmm.
years, 3 years, probably comfortable. I mean, 7, 8, 9 years, it's fuzzier, harder to
Well,
prove.
10 years, it should be changed out, so
Exactly. 10 years, like the 11th year for sure, it's no longer on the
it's no
seller.
longer the summer. Right.
So let your sellers know, hey, after the 10-year mark, you can sleep totally peacefully. knowing it doesn't matter anymore. But the condition precedent language, in this market, it doesn't really matter because we don't have a whole lot of buyers negotiating repairs under home inspection contingencies. But if there comes a day, I thought it would happen long ago, but if there comes a day where the market balances out and we get some negotiating power for buyers and we can say, here's the home inspection report. It lists 72 things that are wrong. We would like you to fix number 1, 7, 12, 13. You know how we do it. That's not the ideal way to word those anyway. If you get one, give us a call, reach out, and we can help you craft language. But you'll always want to put the following repairs, the completion of the following repairs 5 days prior to settlement are a condition precedent to the buyer's performance under the contract. What happens when you have a balanced market and when you guys get back to negotiating repairs, you have a seller that says, I don't want to do that. I know I told them I was going to change the garbage disposal. Garbage disposal is like $100. I'm not doing it. You get a buyer, their ego is hurt. Say, they're not going to fix that? I'm not going to settlement. Well, that's not how it works. Your buyer doesn't have the right to threaten. The buyer still has a duty to go to settlement, still has to perform under the contract, and then after settlement, they could go and sue for the cost of whatever it is that the seller said they were going to fix that they didn't. But if you have those magic words in there, the completion of the following repairs 5 days prior to settlement is a condition precedent to buyer's obligation to perform.
That's
A couple things, yeah. Number one, it's got to be 5 days before. So you're not on pins and needles hoping that when you get to the walkthrough, it's there. Your contract says the buyer has the right to inspect the property 5 days prior to settlement. So, and that's even if you have an as-is addendum. Your buyer gets to go through that. So that means when you go through in that walkthrough 5 days prior to settlement, those repairs better be completed. And you don't need to hear, oh, we're going to get to it. It's going to happen. So it gives your buyer some structure, some comfort, knowing that it's going to be an orderly transaction. Don't worry, the repairs should be done when we do the walkthrough. And if you get there and they haven't been done, that's when you have the absolute leverage to tell the listing agent, hey, you guys didn't do the repairs. My client's going to walk. And it's usually not as luxurious as they didn't do it. Usually the scenario that we see is their cousin did it. They taped it. It's just some kind of sloppy, shoddy job where the buyer's disappointed because we've drafted ambiguous language. It says, seller's gonna fix this. Well, seller thought, this is fixed. Buyer thought, that looks like trash. So now the buyer can say, well, I'm not going to settlement. And that seller should say, geez, can they do that? Their listing agent should say, talk to an attorney. But an attorney should tell them, yeah, they can do that because the repairs 5 days prior to settlement were a condition precedent to their performance. So that's solid language that you can use to make sure you guys have that leverage.
Hashtag condition precedent.
Condition precedents.
I need a slide,
That's
man.
trending now.
Yeah, we need that slide, condition precedents.
Condition precedent. And the spot where you're gonna wanna put that, when you guys dust off that home inspection report form that we don't use right now, yeah, right at the top of whatever it is, like 3C. You just put that in there and then you put your list. And again, if you're in the tight spot where you can't reach out to us and you have to draft your own language, I had a law school professor said something that stuck with me. He said, after I draft something, I hand it to the dumbest person that I know, or the dumbest person around. Say, hey, can you read over this? What does this mean? Now, I'm not gonna hand any of this to you because you guys are all sharp and wonderful. But really, you want it to be clear, easy to follow, and you don't want somebody to have a
Simplest
Harvard law degree to understand it.
We have another question.
And when you draft something, try to look at your own wording to say, is there another way I could read this? Is there another way that I could construe this? If somebody wanted to give me a hard time, ooh, sorry about that. No. So we might finish writing something up and say, nailed it. That's great. That's perfect. That's what I meant to say. But usually there are 2, 3 other ways to look at it. And that person on the other side of the deal, you'd be surprised at how many different ways they come up with reading what you wrote. Just like fixing. Seller's gonna fix whatever. What's fix mean? So 80,000 ways to fix something.
So do we want to put in there fixed by professional or repaired by professional? Certified,
That's
licensed?
a fancy word. Yeah, I mean, ideally, reach out and we'll help create some bulletproof language for you. But yeah, you want to identify, specify.
Yeah,
Licensed plumber,
yeah,
licensed contractor, provide copies of all receipts
right.
from licensed contractors. So the more you can pin them down to clearly define, because if the seller signs something saying, I'm gonna fix whatever, they're agreeing to fix it. If they sign something saying, I'm going to replace the driveway, I'm gonna have a licensed professional replace the driveway, it's very tight language. There's very little ambiguity there. So just try to pin them down.
And you,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, mine's the joke.
So you can request the receipts too, like. in
If
the-
you've specified it, the comedic timing, it just throws off the comedic timing.
Yeah, I was looking for the mind blown emoji. That's a lot.
But the point of today, I think, I don't want to speak for Chris, but it's to help you guys be aware of the moments where you reach out to somebody.
Yes.
You don't need to memorize all this stuff. Some of the stuff like the MarylandLandRec.net, that's a cool resource. Use it.
Right, know the basics, but know who to call when you don't understand what's going on.
Totally.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, so you don't need to memorize all this stuff. Just have a familiarity with the landmines to say, oh, there's a landmine. I'm not digging it up, but I'm calling somebody.
Call Chris.
Always call Chris. He's way better.
Make sure you pick up all the time too.
Thank you.
I must have sent the wrong email. I didn't get a response.
Me?
Ali.
I tell you, my inbox often feels like I'm taking on machine gun fire.
Okay.
Like if I don't respond right away, a lot of times it's just like, whoa, where did it go? And I've got to walk a mile to find a bullet. So
Okay.
I try. So my apologies. And what I've told agents before is if it's something that's time sensitive and you need to have an answer, call me, text me, harass me. But if it turns out that you're wrong and it's not an emergency, you're on my blacklist. And I'm like, oh, this is the crazy one that thought it's an emergency when it was like.
No, I won't know until you tell me.
All right. And same thing goes for nights and weekends. You know, I trust all of our professionals here to use their discretion. If it's something that's time sensitive, if I see an agent calling me on the weekend or at night, I'm gonna trust them that they're in a situation, they're in a bind, and I want to be there for them. When I pick up the phone and they say, I got a settlement coming up in 3 weeks, and I'm just waiting. Yeah.
No, it's
You're
not.
gonna hear my tone shift.
Did you just call me at 10 o'clock at night?
But the Facebook group too is good to put your questions in there, and you can always tag Ali.
Yeah,
You're
that's,
too, right, Chris?
if you guys get calls, I mean, these are just some random notes I've got. If you guys get calls about foreclosures, meaning your client wants to know how much time they have and this and that, we're not really in that market, but you guys are gonna be in this for the long haul. When the market shifts and you see different things come up, reach out if it's a short sale situation like what Chris was saying. If your client, you're talking to them and they don't know what bills they've got out there, they start telling you something that sounds weird. Like, a couple years ago, I fell behind on my mortgage, but then my mortgage company, they made it good. Oh, that scares me. That usually means there's a forbearance agreement and they probably owe like $60,000. And it's still on the property, the lender just put it on the back end of the loan. So those are the kinds of things that they find out right before settlement. And this isn't like a silly, crazy scenario. We see it. And the sellers are shocked that their equity is stripped. They had another property lined up that they were buying, and now that money is gone. And they thought they were gonna walk away with 30,000 in their pocket, and now they actually need 10,000.
How can that equity be stripped if they didn't have the money to pay the forbearance? I mean, because isn't that supposed to be paid before you close, before you settle?
That's the whole
That's why the
point.
equity's going.
Yeah, that's what the whole
The
point.
buyer's paying it, buyer's giving, the money to the.
So if, let's say
seller
there's
gives
a,
the bank.
let's say there's
Oh,
a
so I
house.
thought they just meant you just can't do anything. Like if it's a lien on a house, you can't even go to the table.
No. So here's the scenario.
Oh,
Let's say that this is the house, and this house is being sold for $300,000. There's a mortgage on it. We know the mortgage is $250,000, and the seller tells you, "I got a mortgage. Here's my statement. It shows $250,000." Okay, cool. Here's your net sheet, $300,000. We take out the $250. We got $50,000 left. We got commission. We got transfer tax. We got all this stuff, and you're gonna have $20,000 at the end. Well, this seller forgot to tell you about the hard times years and years ago. It could be 10 years ago. If it's recorded in land records, it's a lien on the property. So that equity that we're talking about is that bottom line on the net sheet. So that 20,000 or whatever they thought they're walking away with, that's their equity. Now there's this $50,000 forbearance agreement.
Negative 30.
Yeah, so that takes their 20,000 that they thought they had in equity and now requires them to bring 30,000 to the table. This seller is now under contract to sell their house. So they have a contractual obligation.
so they have to come up with that $30,000.
Yeah, their
Or they'll be
contract, yeah, they could be. Now, most buyers are smart enough to say, they're underwater, they got nothing, I'm not gonna waste my time suing them. I'm not gonna hire a lawyer, pay thousands of dollars to go after somebody that's basically judgment proof. So usually the contract is just terminated, but you as the real estate agent just marketed it, did all that, spent money on all kinds of stuff. And now you found out that the deal is dead, and it'll be years before that seller can sell the property. So we just want you to look out for the warnings so that you're not wasting your time.
Ooh, that's a lot of money and time.
That's a disappointing scenario when you find out that you can't go to settlement when you taste the money, you're starting to spend it already. Another thing that we have a lot of right now is flips. It's a hot market, so people can buy that tear down, that trashy house that had bad smoke detectors, and they can go inject 50,000 into it and sell it for 150,000 more. Please, you guys aren't home inspectors, but use common sense. If you're walking into a property, if everybody could pause for a second, just as human beings, follow me. When you buy a new car, Toyota, Honda, whoever has quality assurance. They test those vehicles, they check all these boxes. We have a sense of comfort knowing that when I drive that off the lot, I have an expectation of excellence. Buyers have the same expectation of excellence for these flip houses, and they are disappointed over and over. because they see the flashy granite, they see the new cabinets, but nobody's lived in the house. So when they start running the plumbing, it leaks. When they open the cabinet, it bumps the other one. Test all this stuff. Be critical. Don't just look for the shiny, glitzy nonsense. Your client will do that. They'll walk in, they don't need to touch anything. This is the house I've been waiting for. Yeah, but it was poorly built. There's no quality control. Half the time, there were no permits pulled for all that stuff. So we're trusting the system. We're trusting that there's somebody, something out there doing quality control. You're not a home inspector, but please embed some common sense into the process. Be their first line of defense. Check some things out. See if there are any red flags. If the drawers in the corners start bumping each other. If you can look at certain spots, corners, see if they're not lined up properly. Signs of poor workmanship. If you can spot one when you're showing the property, there are 100 more that you can find out after living there for a couple months. And your client is going to be sad, disappointed, and they're going to be saying, I don't know why my agent didn't notice this. I don't know why the home inspector didn't notice this. So flip houses look glamorous, look terrific, and we have a feeding frenzy over them when they hit the market. But let your client be the one that knows, I need to scratch the surface and see if it all falls apart. Because more times than not, people move into these flips and find out that it was done by somebody with minimal integrity, somebody that's started flipping last year. These houses aren't being flipped by the Ryland Group, Toll Brothers. They're not out here flipping houses. They're being flipped by the people that are hiring whoever off the street, this contractor today and tomorrow.
Cousin Joe.
Yeah, Cousin Joe.
When you're doing your title search, or how do you know it's a flip house?
It's never been lived in. It's a 100-year-old house, 50-year-old house, and everything is brand new.
Okay.
That's a flip house.
And you know, with land records, you can see, this was bought
When it was purchased.
3 months ago, and now it's for sale again.
Okay.
And it's amazing. Yeah.
Said the title guy. Everything goes back to land records.
Yeah.
When it was purchased.
Okay.
And that's a good point. When you look at land records, you're going to see that they bought it for a fraction of what it's on the market for now. And you can go to the listing history and see, whoa, this was listed last year, and look at what the house looked like. It used to be green on the outside. Now it's gray with the beautiful shutters. Flip houses scare me, and it's usually flash and trash. It's very rare that you get a flip house that's done at a very high quality. They're out there, but it's a small fraction of them. So be afraid of, huh?
Do you tell the buyers that? Do you tell them all the information that this is a flip house? You shouldn't be concerned.
You can tell them.
I would at least set the expectation. Like I said, not all is done to a certain level of quality. You may discover things that you need to address after stuff, and I just want,
Cautiousness.
But there is a website, I can't remember off the top of my head, where you can check the permits. Is that on one of the
I
websites?
don't know.
some counties have been able to look up permits.
Definitely with Baltimore City, you can.
Yeah.
I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem is that you can do a whole lot without requiring a permit. Lawfully, you don't necessarily need a permit for a whole lot of things, and it matters based on each jurisdiction. But whether or not permits were pulled, you can do a great flip with no permits. Whether it's lawful or not, we won't specify or answer, but you can have a great flip without permits, and you can have a terrible flip with permits. So I wouldn't completely just put it all in permits. I would look at the quality of stuff. If I see a brand new refrigerator with a ding in it, that's somebody that's trying to cut every corner they can. They got the scratch and dent appliances. They're getting everything else off the bargain rack. And they're hiring bargain rack, clearance sale contractors. They gave them the cheapest price. So be very afraid of flips. And if your clients, if you have a listing appointment and your seller wants you to list a flip, be terrified as well.
Wow.
Because it's going to look beautiful. You're excited. Oh, this will sell in a minute. But just know that they may not have pulled permits. There may be defects in the house. And the seller who just gutted a house has more intimate knowledge than Mr. and Mrs. homeowner that have lived in the house for years and years. Mr. and Mrs. homeowner were consumers. They stayed in the house, they lived there, they used it. The flipper tore the drywall off potentially, tore the cabinets out. They had an in-depth understanding of what's going on in this house. And if they pulled the cabinets off and saw that insulation was missing and didn't re-insulate that wall, most flippers are not going to have the integrity to say, nobody's gonna see this, but I'm gonna do it the right way. It's not how the world works, unfortunately. So if you're getting a listing appointment for a flip property, be very cautious because you're the one with the license. And if that buyer moves in and gets disappointed that they've got all these issues because the quality control wasn't there, their expectations weren't met. And trust me, 50% of the calls that I get from random potential clients right now are disgruntled buyers that want to sue.
Wow.
It's sky high because they're paying top dollar. They want good stuff, whether it's a resale or a flip. And the problem is that it's hard a lot of times for them to prove that the seller knew or should have known of a latent defect. But when it's a flip house, they should have known because they were digging up in there. So that's all the running of my mouth I've got for tonight. If you guys have questions, fire away.
I hope you do part 2 or something.
Part 2?
Part 3, part 4.
You guys are so good.
That you guys are here, so we can.
No problem. But beyond here also, it's you guys can reach out to us if anything pops up, and even if you just have a general question. But
Yeah, remember, please tell Brian, he'll get you set up with the next seller that she has.
sit in there on camera.
And to the people on the snap, realistic snap, before you go into that.
I did not.
Give us a shout.
Regina.
Okay, oh, I'm gonna wait, okay, so you are through. Thank you, Zoomland, for participating in Winning Wednesdays. And that was a lot of valuable information. I am the emoji, look at my hair, I'm the emoji. Like, just my brain is just blowing right now. Thank you, Chris, thank you, Eileen, for a fabulous presentation. So,
Paula.
you're welcome,
Thank you, Paula.
and we are out.
That's me.
Paula was amazing.